There are seasons in life when the weight of pain feels like it's pressing against your chest, stealing the air from your lungs. Nights when you lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering why everything had to turn out this way. You ask yourself, why me? Why now? Why does it hurt so much? Pain has a strange way of isolating us. It makes you feel like you're walking through life alone, carrying a burden that no one else could ever understand. People may look at you and think you're fine because you smile during the day, but only you know the tears you cry when no one is watching. Only you know the thoughts that keep you awake when the world is sleeping. Only you feel that heaviness in your soul, like a shadow that follows you everywhere. And maybe you've asked God the same question I once asked. If you love me, then why does it hurt this bad? But here's something I've learned. Pain is not the end of your story. Pain is not the final chapter of your life. Pain, as unbearable as it feels right now, is a classroom where lessons are being taught that you could never learn any other way. Think about it. The strongest trees are not grown in comfort, they are grown in storms. The most beautiful diamonds are not formed in ease, they are formed under pressure. And the strongest versions of ourselves are not born when life is easy. They are born when life is hard. What you call breaking, God calls shaping. Let me explain. When clay is being molded in the hands of a potter, it has to be pressed, stretched, and sometimes broken down again before it becomes the vessel the potter had in mind. The clay doesn't understand why it's being crushed. It doesn't understand why it's being reshaped. But the potter does. And in the same way, maybe your life feels like it's breaking apart, but what if that's not the end? What if it's God shaping you into the person you were always meant to be? You see, pain is not meaningless. Pain is a message. It's telling you that something deeper is happening inside you. Pain is often the birthplace of purpose. Some of the greatest victories in life are hidden inside seasons of struggle. But here's the problem. When you're in pain, all you see is the darkness in front of you. You can't imagine light at the end of the tunnel. You can't imagine joy returning to your heart. You can't imagine laughter filling your home again. The weight feels too heavy, the sorrow feels too deep, and the future feels too far away. I know how it feels to want to give up, to look at life and think, what's the point? Why keep fighting? Why keep believing? But let me tell you, every single breath you take in the middle of your pain is proof that you are stronger than you think. The fact that you're still standing even when you feel like collapsing is proof that God has not abandoned you. Sometimes we think God is absent in our pain, but the truth is, He is closest in those moments. The Bible says God is near to the brokenhearted, not far, not distant, not uninterested. He is nearer, right beside you. Even when you don't feel Him, He is there. Even when your prayers feel unanswered, He is listening. Even when your tears fall, He catches every single one of them. Think about this. A seed has to be buried in the darkness before it can grow into something beautiful. The soil feels like death to the seed, but in reality, it's the beginning of life. And maybe, just maybe, this dark season you're in is not your ending, but the soil of a new beginning. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels unfair. Yes, it feels like too much to bear. But pain has a purpose you may not see right now. Pain is building strength you will need for tomorrow. Pain is carving character inside of you. Pain is preparing you for a future that is bigger than the present moment. One day, you will look back and realize that the very thing that threatened to destroy you became the reason you discovered who you really are. And I want you to hold on to this truth. You are not defined by your pain. You are not your heartbreak. You are not your failure. You're not your loss. These are chapters in your story, but they are not the title of your book. God is still writing. And the author of your life never ends a story in defeat. So tonight, if you're lying awake with a heavy heart, remember this. The weight you feel is not there to crush you, it's there to shape you. It's not there to end you, it's there to transform you. The pain you feel right now is proof that you are still alive, still fighting, still moving forward. And one day, when the healing comes, and it will, you will stand on the other side of the storm and say, if I made it through that, then I can make it through anything. Hold on, don't quit. Don't give in to the lie that this is the end, because your pain is not the end of your story. It is only the beginning of a greater one. There is a pain even deeper than pain itself, the pain of silence. Not the silence of people, but the silence of God. You've been there, haven't you? You've prayed with tears streaming down your face, begging for answers, pleading for relief. You've whispered prayers in the stillness of night when no one else could hear the breaking of your soul. You've asked for signs, for guidance, for a single word that could carry you through. But heaven seems silent. And in that silence, questions begin to rise. God, do you hear me? God, are you ignoring me? God, if you love me, then why won't you answer? That silence can feel heavier than the pain itself, because pain at least reminds you that something is happening. Silence makes you wonder if nothing is happening at all. But here is what I need you to understand. Silence does not mean absence. Silence does not mean God has turned his back on you. Silence does not mean your prayers are wasted. Think of it like this. When a teacher gives a test in school, the classroom grows quiet. The teacher doesn't speak, not because they have left, but because they are watching to see what you've learned. The silence isn't abandonment, it's a test. It's a moment of growth, and God's silence often works the same way. He isn't gone, he isn't ignoring you, he is preparing you. You see, faith is not built when every prayer is answered immediately. Faith is built in the waiting, in the silence, in the moments where you feel forgotten but choose to believe you're still seen. Real faith is trusting God when you can't hear him, can't see him, and can't understand him. It's easy to trust when the doors are opening, when the blessings are flowing, when life feels good. But can you trust him when the doors are locked? Can you trust him when the blessings seem delayed? Can you trust him when his voice is silent? That's where true faith is born. And let me tell you, silence is not empty. God's silence is often filled with more love and intention than you can imagine. Sometimes he is quiet because he is arranging things behind the scenes that you could never orchestrate yourself. Sometimes he is silent because he knows that if he spoke too soon, you would not be ready to receive what he has to give. Look back at your life for a moment. Think about the times you thought nothing was happening, but later realized that everything was happening. Think about the doors that didn't open for you, the relationships that didn't work out, the opportunities that slipped through your fingers. At the time you felt abandoned, but now you see they were blessings in disguise. You see that God's silence was protection, his no was mercy, and his delay was preparation. Imagine a child asking their parent for something sharp, something dangerous, something they don't yet understand. The parent says nothing, maybe, even looks away because they know the child is not ready. Not because they don't love them, but because they love them too much to say yes. And isn't that what God does with us? Sometimes his silence is not punishment, it's protection. But here's the challenge. In the silence, doubts creep in. The enemy whispers, see, he doesn't care. You're on your own. And if you're not careful, you start to believe the lie that God has abandoned you. But the truth is, God is never closer than when you feel nothing at all. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and left in prison for years. Do you think he didn't feel the silence of God? Do you think he didn't wonder if God had forgotten him? But years later, when Joseph stood, it was the space where God was preparing you, strengthening you, and protecting you. Hold on in the silence. Wait with faith, not fear. Because the silence of God is never the absence of God. There is something we all struggle with: perspective. We see life through the lens of a single moment, a single heartbreak, a single disappointment. But God sees life through the lens of eternity. You and I see fragments. God sees the whole dot. Think about it. When you pick up a puzzle piece and look at it in your hand, it doesn't make sense. The shapes, the colors, the jagged edges, it looks meaningless on its own. But when the puzzle is complete, every single piece, no matter how strange or broken, has a place in the bigger picture, and that's exactly how life is. Right now, you may be holding a piece that looks painful, confusing, and unfair. A broken relationship, a missed opportunity, a season of loss, a closed door. And you look at it and say, God, how could this possibly fit into anything good? But God sees what you can't. He sees the picture you cannot imagine. And he knows how this painful piece will one day connect to another piece, and then another, until the masterpiece is revealed. The problem is, we want the masterpiece without the mess. We want the beauty without the process. But masterpieces are never painted in one stroke. They take time, detail, and layer upon layer. And God is painting something in your life right now, even if all you see is the unfinished canvas. Think of Joseph again. If you had met him while he was in the pit, sold into slavery, or sitting in prison, you would have thought his life was ruined. You would have thought his story ended in tragedy. But God saw the bigger picture. He saw Joseph as the man who would one day save an entire nation. The pit was part of the picture. The prison was part of the picture. The betrayal was part of the picture. And so is your pain. You see the moment. God sees the masterpiece. You see the broken chapter. God sees the entire book. But here's the challenge. When you're in the middle of the story, it rarely makes sense. That's why trust is so important. Trust is choosing to believe in the author, even when you don't understand the plot. It's like watching a movie halfway through and assuming you know the ending. If you pause the story at its darkest point, you'll walk away thinking it ends in disaster. But if you keep watching, if you wait for the resolution, you'll see how every twist and turn, every heartbreak and struggle was leading somewhere beautiful. Your life is no different. Maybe right now you're in the middle of your story and it feels like tragedy, but don't quit on chapter 3 when God has already written chapter 10. Don't assume the darkness will last forever when the light is already written into your future. One day, you'll look back and realize the heartbreak was necessary to guide you. The delay was necessary to prepare you. The loss was necessary to strengthen you. The disappointment was necessary to redirect you. Everything had a place in the bigger picture, but I know what you're thinking. That sounds nice, but how do I live with this pain right now? The answer is simple, but not easy. You hold on. You trust one day at a time. You remind yourself every morning that what you see is not all there is. You remember that God is not done yet. Have you ever looked at the back of a tapestry? It's a mess of knots, loose threads, and tangled colors. It doesn't look like art at all. But when you flip it over, the front reveals a beautiful design. That's what life feels like sometimes. From our side, it looks messy, confusing, tangled. But from God's side, it's a work of art. And here's the truth. Sometimes the very things you prayed God would take away are the things he will use to reveal his greatest work in your life. Moses stuttered, yet God used him to speak to Pharaoh. David was a shepherd boy, yet God used him to defeat Goliath. Paul was imprisoned, yet God used him to write letters that still encourage millions today. Do you see the pattern? The broken pieces became the building blocks of purpose. So maybe What you're facing today is not the end, but the beginning of something greater than you could ever imagine. Maybe your pain is not punishment, it's positioning. Positioning you for a future that looks nothing like your present. Think about the seed again. Buried in the soil, it feels like death. Dark, cold, hidden. But what looks like burial is actually planting. What feels like an ending is really the beginning of new life. The seed doesn't see the bigger picture, but the gardener does. And in the same way, you may feel buried right now, but God is planting you for a harvest you can't yet see. That's why you can't give up now. That's why you can't let this moment define you. This is only a piece of the puzzle, only a chapter in the story, only a thread in the tapestry. Don't judge the whole picture by what you see today, Dot. And here's the most amazing part. When the bigger picture is finally revealed, it won't just make sense, it will inspire others. Your survival will become someone else's hope. Your breakthrough will become someone else's proof that God is real. Your testimony will be the reason someone else keeps going, Dot, so hold on. Don't lose heart. What you see today is not the end. The author is still writing. The artist is still painting. The gardener is still planting. The puzzle maker is still fitting the pieces together. One day, when you stand on the other side of this storm, you'll look back and say, now I see it, now I understand. Every moment, every tear, every loss, it was all leading me here. And you will realize that the masterpiece was always worth the mess. Trust. Such a small word. But one of the hardest things to live out, Dot. It's easy to say, I trust God, when life is going well, when the bills are paid. The relationships are healthy, the path is clear. But what about when nothing makes sense? What about when the door you prayed for slams shut? When the healing you begged for hasn't come? When the silence of God stretches on longer than you thought you could endure? That's when trust becomes real, Dot. Faith is not proven when the sun is shining. Faith is proven in the storm. Trust is not tested when you have answers. Trust is tested when all you have are questions. You see, we often think trust means having no fear, but that's not true. Trust does not erase fear. Trust chooses to keep walking despite the fear. Trust says, I don't understand, but I will. Still move forward. Imagine standing at the edge of a dark staircase. You can't see the bottom, you can't see what's ahead, but God whispers, take the first step. Your heart races, your mind screams, what if I fall? What if I fail? What if it all goes wrong? But trust answers back, what if I fly? What if God catches me? What if it all works out? That's what real faith looks like. Not certainty, but surrender. Not clarity, but confidence in the one who leads you. Think of Abraham. God told him, leave your home. Leave everything you know. Go to a land I will show you. Notice God didn't give him a map. He didn't give him details. He simply said, go, and Abraham went. That is trust, and maybe that's what God is asking from you right now. Not to have every answer, not to see the whole picture, but to take the next step. To believe that even if you don't know the way, God does. But here's the struggle. Trust feels risky. Trust means letting go of control. And as humans, we crave control. We want to know the timeline, the outcome, the why. We want God to explain himself before we obey. But God rarely gives explanations, he gives invitations. Invitations to believe, to surrender, to trust. Because if you had every answer, you wouldn't need faith. If you saw the whole plan, you wouldn't need trust. Faith exists precisely because we don't see. Trust matters precisely because we don't know, Dot. So let me ask you, what if the very thing you're resisting right now is the door to your breakthrough? What if the step you're afraid to take is the step that leads to freedom? What if the silence you despise is the silence where God is preparing your miracle? You cannot wait until you feel ready to trust. Trust is a choice, not a feeling. You don't wait until you feel brave to act, you act, and then bravery rises. Think about Peter stepping out of the boat to walk on water. Logic said, stay inside. It's safer here. Fear said, you'll sink. But trust said, if Jesus is out there, I'd rather be on the water with him than in the boat without him. And that's the choice we all face. Do we stay in the boat of comfort, or do we step into the unknown with God? Here's the truth. Trust is not about outcomes. It's about obedience. Trust doesn't say, I'll follow you if you guarantee success. Trust says, I'll follow you because you are God, and that is enough. That doesn't mean it will be easy. Trusting God may mean letting go of something you thought you couldn't live without. It may mean walking away from people who no longer align with your purpose. It may mean waiting longer than you wanted to wait. It may mean stepping into something terrifying. But I promise you, every act of trust will lead to something greater than fear ever could. Sometimes trust looks like standing still when everything in you wants to run. Sometimes trust looks like moving forward when everything in you wants to stay safe. Sometimes trust looks like putting the pen back in God's hand and saying, write the story you want, not the one I planned. And here's what I've discovered. Every time I've chosen to trust, God has proven himself faithful. Maybe not in the way I expected, maybe not in the timeline I wanted, but always in a way that looking back, I could say, that was better. That was wiser. That was love. So if you are in a season right now where nothing makes sense, let me encourage you. Choose trust. Choose it when you wake up in the morning and the weight feels heavy. Choose it when the prayers seem unanswered. Choose it when the road is dark and the silence is long. Choose to believe that God's hand is steady even when your heart is shaking. And remember this. Trust doesn't mean life will be painless, but it does mean you'll never walk through the pain alone. Trust doesn't mean storms won't come, but it does mean the one who calms storms is in your boat. Trust doesn't mean you'll always get what you want, but it does mean you'll always receive what you need. You may not understand the plan, but you can always trust the planner. And one day, when you look back, you will see that every step of trust built a road that carried you straight into the purpose God had for you all along. So today, right now, make the choice. Not to fear, not to quit, not to give up, but to trust. Because even when you can't trace his hand, you can trust his heart that there will come a day, maybe sooner than you think, when you will look back at the pain you're carrying right now and realize something powerful. What once tried to break you actually built you. No, that's hard to believe when you're in the middle of the storm. Right now, it feels like the weight of life is too heavy, the silence too loud, the confusion too deep. You wonder if you'll ever smile again, if you'll ever feel whole again, if you'll ever see light after this darkness. But listen to me, storms don't last forever. Pain does not get the final word. And God does not waste your suffering. One day, you will stand stronger, braver, wiser, and you'll realize the very thing you thought would destroy you is the thing God used to transform you. Think about a scar on your body. At one time, that scar was a wound. It hurt. It bled. It nearly broke you. But now it's healed. Now it's a reminder, not of your weakness, but of your survival. And that's how life works. Every scar you carry is not proof of defeat. It's proof that you survived what was meant to kill you. And when you survive, you don't just survive for yourself. You survive for others. Because your victory becomes someone else's hope. Your story becomes someone else's roadmap. Your testimony becomes someone else's lifeline. Think of it. The encouragement that once lifted you came from someone who had walked through their own valley. And one day, you will be that person for someone else. You will be the voice that says, I know it hurts, but you'll make it. I know it feels impossible, but you're stronger than you think. I know that. Night feels endless, but the morning always comes. That is victory beyond the pain, not just healing for you, but hope for others. And here's what makes it even more powerful. Victory doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It means you come out better than before, stronger than before, wiser than before, more compassionate than before. The fire you went through refines you. The storm you survived equips you. The pain you endured becomes the platform from which you rise. Look at Job. He lost everything: family, health, wealth. He cried out in despair. He questioned. He grieved. But he never let go of God. And in the end, God restored him, not just to where he was before, but to a place greater than he had ever been. Double the blessing, double the strength, double the victory. And that's the promise you can hold on to. Your story is not ending in ashes. Your story is heading toward beauty. The ashes may be real, but so is the beauty God brings out of them. Same God who turned Joseph's prison into a palace. The same God who turned David's battlefield into a throne. The same God who turned the cross into a resurrection. That same God is working in